Welcome to the Educational Leadership Podcast with Principal JL, the place where school leaders recharge, rethink, and remember their purpose. If you're a superintendent, assistant superintendent, a principal, assistant principal, dean of students, teacher leader, or a future administrator, you're in the right place. Here we mix practical strategies with real conversations, a little wit, and a whole lot of purpose. Because leadership isn't about the title on your badge, it's the influence you carry every single day with your teachers, staff, students, and families. Our mission is simple: to inform, inspire, and to help you lead with purpose. To give you tools that actually work, stories that spark reflection, and ideas you can use the minute an episode ends. So grab that caffeinated drink, a notebook, and your growth mindset, and get ready to level up your leadership one episode at a time. Because around here, we don't aim for perfect. We aim to be 1% better every single day. Now let's get to the episode. What does it take to lead a school for over a decade, build a culture that students, staff, and families love, and somehow make people laugh about it along the way? If you've ever wondered how leadership, authenticity, and humor can come together to create impact, not just in a building, but across thousands of people online, this episode is for you. Today, I'm joined by Nick Holtvluwer, principal of Mammoth Heights Elementary in Parker, Colorado. Nick has spent the last 10 years leading his school community while also building a powerful presence on social media, reaching over 100,000 followers by sharing the real and often hilarious day-to-day life of a principal. And if that wasn't enough, he's also taken the same energy to the stage as a stand-up comic at Comedy Works in Denver. Now let's get to the conversation with Nick Holtvluwer. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Educational Leadership Podcast. Today, I am super excited to bring in not in just an educational leader principal, but he's also a comedian. His name is Nick Holtvluwer. Nick, welcome to the show.
You got it. Thank you so much, Jeff. Yeah, you can use that word comedian lightly. It's I'm not sure if I've earned that label just yet.
Well, hey, I see you on social media, going to shows, performing. You know, I love watching your content out there on top of your stuff that you do as a principal. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to dive right in, Nick, to the very first question I ask everybody on the show. What inspired you to become an educator?
Yeah, so it's not my first career. Education was always a dream of mine, but when I was in college, I fell in love with television production. So I decided I was just going to go full bore into television production, even though I had this dream in the back of my head to be an educator and to be able to work closely and inspire children. So I thought I could combine the two. And I thought maybe I'll go work in children's television, you know, and what's the pinnacle of children's television at the time when I was in college? Mr. Rogers, right? So I thought I'm going to go work for Mr. Rogers. I knew he produced his show in Pennsylvania, and I did everything I could to get out there. And I did a semester through my college in Philadelphia. And then it wasn't too long after that, Mr. Rogers films in Pittsburgh. So I had to veer off, and I worked for a PBS station in Philadelphia. So I fell in love with television, first of all, went back home to my hometown of Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I worked for the local NBC affiliate, and still that nagging feeling of I missed my calling to go into education. I think it's a calling, right? Nobody kind of goes into the career of education for the money or the fame or the respect. So I went back to school at my alma mater, Hope College in Holland, Michigan, and I turned my communication major into a language arts teachable major. So after 5 years, I was a 29-year-old dude going back to college. And not only that, with elementary education, And so I had to kind of swallow my pride and take some risks, go back. And then from there, I knew that's where I needed to be. And I taught first grade, third grade, and fifth grade. And that was in Tampa, Florida. And then I got my master's at USF in Tampa, Florida for my admin license, where I became an assistant principal. And then from there, moved back home to Michigan for my first principal job. And then finally, my wife had an opportunity out in Colorado, where we are now. And I've been a principal out in Douglas County at Mammoth Heights Elementary for the last 10 years. So definitely not the normal path of an educator. Some of it was trying to avoid becoming an educator, but always knowing that's what you needed to do with your life. So I've learned, though, even though you may take a different path into education, the lessons you learn every step of the way are valuable as an educator, because what I learned in television production, in scheduling, and in a little bit of sales all comes back to what we do in education, especially in the principal role. So a long, winding road, but I learned lessons along the way that were valuable to where I am today. You think you're wasting your time on such a winding road, and that maybe you wasted opportunities, but there's always value in those experiences on the way to becoming an educator.
Now, you and I have kind of similar paths, but we're both non-traditional educators.
Yeah.
I didn't get into education right away. I took what we call the 10-year route to just graduate undergrad. A lot of that had to do with, just life choices I made when I was young. I worked in a factory. I was in the military. And, it wasn't until I was 28 years old, 29, I think. I turned 29 when I got my first job as an educator. So, I mean, I'm like going to my 10-year graduation reunion, talking to people. What have you been up to? Not much, just trying to finish college. Now I got my first job, and we're off and rolling. So I've been doing it ever since, and I just love it. There's times where I go, man, I wish I would have started sooner.
Yeah.
But I think life takes you the way you're supposed to go in those moments. So you kind of just, you're all over here in Philadelphia, Michigan, Philadelphia, Tampa, back to Michigan. We're going to maybe get into some of that. I don't know, what got you to all those places, but, just as a teacher, you taught, if I remember right, tell me if I'm wrong, first, third, and fifth grade. Is that correct?
First, third, and second. I think I may have said fifth. So always the primary grades.
All right. So those primary grades, you're a special man that could handle that. I'm secondary all the way. I think it takes a special type of person to be down in elementary. Now, as a principal, I was a 712 principal at the last place I was at before I became the head principal here at Hastings High. And my favorite thing to do when I was having a rough day was go to the elementary side and get hugs, because they love giving hugs. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'll go over there and make myself feel better, go back. But don't ask me to discipline. And that I was an elementary principal for about a day, and I said, nah, you can have it back. I'll go back to my side.
Yeah, that's one of my jokes I sometimes say, is that people would ask me, why did I choose to go into the elementary level instead of the middle school or high school? My answer is always the same. I like to be worshipped. So I just
hilarious. Yeah, they do look at you like, ooh, oh, Miss Thompson, and they run up to you, and you could be having the crappiest day ever, and they're gonna give you a hug, and you'd be excited to see you. And I'm just like, okay, I get why people are down here, but at the same time, I have a daughter that is a fifth grade teacher in Kansas City. So, I kind of talk to her about her experiences on things. So it's kind of fun with that. So as basically a primary teacher, first, second, third grade teacher, what are some things you learned as a teacher that helped you become the leader you are today?
Yeah, I think it's always incredibly helpful to have that perspective from especially the lower grades, because I always knew elementary education was where my zone was. And so being able to talk to what we have to go through in the trenches as a first grade teacher, second grade teacher, third grade teacher, what I learned the most, though, is, when you try to go it alone as a teacher, it gets tough. It's a really tough job to be able to do it all by yourself. And so I learned, just how to rely on the resources, rely on admin for their support, and just, rely on the interventionists, the special ed teachers. That was something that took me a little bit longer to realize, because I was like, I'm going to go in, I'm going to do it all myself. This I can handle. I got my own little space. I don't need to listen to any teammates, because I'm a little bit different in on my approach to teaching. But I learned a lot about just being able to rely on those support systems that are in the school. And if you try to do it by yourself, or you try to go alone, it makes the job incredibly difficult. So that kind of goes into my educational leadership philosophy, is that we're in this together, and it's best to be a servant leader and to support your teachers. And so they always know that you're there for them. It's because it's a stressful job as a teacher. So you come from an angle of, I've been there, I've tried to go it alone, but I understand the power of the team and the resources that a school provides.
I hear you there. I know one of the things that I love about the work we do at our school is the PLC aspect, and where we collaborate, we have dedicated time for that. And that's one of my hiring points when I hire somebody. You're not going to be isolated, because, me and my assistant principals, we have worked at school districts where it's like, here's your classroom, there's your books, see you later. Like figure it out. I remember that very clearly when I had my first job, got my math room, I got my books. Oh, there's the books. Yeah, see you later. Figure it out. Like, there was no guidance, and that's one of the things I try to do is, like, we have our system set up in place to where if we bring someone new in, they got things, they got systems, they got people to go to, and so I really love that you learned that. Don't do this alone, because you can't. It's harder, and it's a lot. It's one of those things. You can't do this job alone. You need people around you, good people around you, to help you all the way through on that. Absolutely. So, what was it that made you go, I'm going to try this, educational leadership, the administration route? Was there someone that kind of nudged you along the way? Was it something you just knew you were going to get into? What's the story? What got you into becoming, I believe, assistant principal first?
Yeah, you're right. Well, I would watch really great leaders who hired me, who I worked for as principals very early on. I was observing them, and it didn't take me long to realize there's no way I'll ever do that job. They got it under control, and that's a pretty heavy lift for an educator. But it didn't take very long for Mrs. Bass, who was my principal in Tampa, to say, hey, have you ever thought about going into administration? And I said, yeah, I thought about it for 2 seconds. And then I left that thought real quick. That thought escaped quickly. I didn't fight it. I didn't fight that urge. And so she said, well, I think you should look into it. And you know how it is when education, you have to continue to keep up with with your continuing development in education and master's degrees. So like, well, if I'm going to go get higher up on the pay scale and I need to get work towards a master's, the only thing that really makes sense for me is educational leadership. So I went back to school at USF and worked towards my master's in educational leadership. And so I thought, I'm just going to get it. It'll be fine, And then you start making connections even at grad school, where my finance professor, Dr. Bookman, his wife was a principal in the same district who needed an assistant principal. And it just so happened it was right in the middle of a school year, like in October. So I interviewed, I got the job, and I didn't expect to have to not only go into administration as an assistant principal, but on Friday, being a second grade teacher, and then on Monday, being an assistant principal. And that was quite an experience. So it happened quickly once I decided to make that move. And so when you have people that are out there kind of encouraging you, you have to listen. And when Mrs. Bass said something who I very much respected, I needed to listen. And then when my professors were telling me, you really need to look at this position who I respected, you listen, and you hopefully, you make the best choice for you and your family along the way. And yeah, it just kind of worked out good. And yeah, never looked back.
There you go. So as an assistant principal, what were some of your roles, your duties that you had to do, and what are some experiences you had as an
Yeah.
assistant principal that helped you like form
Yeah.
your leadership that you have?
Yeah. I remember being so nervous to send out my first email. I remember like, all right, I got to check this thing over. This is not going to like a few parents. This is going to like teachers and the whole staff. And so I probably combed over that first email for any kind of mistakes or grammatical errors for like an hour. And I was so nervous even to send out the first email. And the thought of getting on the overhead speaker to make an announcement was terrifying. Right. And that's stuff you just got taken for granted when you're a teacher. It just happens. Emails go out, the overhead announcements go on. You don't think much of it, but when you got to do it, it was those little things made me incredibly nervous. And I'll never forget, I came from a very more affluent school where I was a teacher, more high social economic class. And then I went to a school that had a little bit lower social economic, and they had what's called an effective needs program. So I was just sitting in my office. I don't know really what to do. A few days ago, I was teaching second grade math, and now I'm just sitting here, and a teacher just runs by my office, throws her head in real quick, and says, "We got a runner. We got a runner." And I was like, "Wait, what? Kids do that?" I had no idea. I had no idea that a kid would be so disruptive just to leave the building, and that was an eye opener. So I got real good at being able to track down kids who eloped. That was something new. So those things you never learn in college, you have to do right away on day one as an assistant principal. But I was there for about 3 years, and it was a very rewarding experience because you learn so much. And it's probably the definition of, drinking through the fire hose.
Yeah, you bet. I remember a few times where we had some kids at my last district that would elope or run out the building. You got to realize our with the K-12 district, and it was out in the middle of the country. So the nearest thing to it is a cornfield. So when the kids are running, I mean, they're getting out on the highway, running away. So we've had a few times where we're like, "Oh, great, we had to go out there and get them back in," and I remember a few times having to deal with some kids that decided they were just going to take off, and they were special needs kids.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like they don't realize the danger they're about putting themselves into, and so you're trying to get them where they need to go, and gotta call the parents and let them know everything's fine. And there's things that people don't realize that you do when they're in the classroom teaching. They don't realize the things that you're managing. They don't realize the fires you're putting out. They don't realize the people that are coming in and, they want to have a conversation, good, positive, and different. Who cares? But you're always constantly got something going on from one day to the next. And I found out that no 2 days are the same.
Never.
Yeah, there's always something that you're not prepared for that you're just like, really? I got to do this now?
I can think of so many stories. Like even your first staff meeting, standing in the front of all the teachers, and I was like, did I look like that when I was a teacher sitting in the tables? Man, was I the one with that scowl on my face? But yeah, you learn to even manage staff meetings. Yeah, I'll never forget. There was like, I was leading a staff meeting. My principal was out for the day, and there was two teachers kind of getting into a little bit of a heated argument. Nothing too crazy. And afterwards, other teachers came up to me and said I needed to put a stop to that. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess I should have taken more control over that situation. Sometimes you were just in teacher mode, not admin mode, and that was a switch I had to turn on quicker than I thought.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I've had a few times where some staff members would, get a little bit too vocal with each other. All right, it's gonna stop right now. Like, you have to look at those things. And when the first time you have to do it, it's kind of like, whoa, like, that was crazy. But
this is crazy.
You kind of get used to it sometimes. And I've learned, like, the more you know your staff, and where I'm currently at, I'm about 75 teachers and about 45 classified staff. So I've gotten to know them over the last 4 years really well. So I can kind of maybe head some things off before they go down
Yeah.
a certain trail now, but it took some time to learn that before you can, figure out how to, go, oh, we better like go over
Yeah.
here now.
Divert. We got to figure something out. We got to calm this situation down. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. So you were assistant principal, and then what got you from assistant principal to building principal? I know you're in Tampa, and then you got out to Colorado as well. But what's the story behind becoming a principal?
Yeah. So I was a principal. in Tampa, or assistant principal in Tampa. I had the opportunity to move back home to where I was, my hometown in Grand Rapids, Holland, Michigan. And so I was able to secure my first principal role in Michigan. It was at a Title I building. And so it was kind of a little bit of a homecoming. My wife and I had our very first kiddo at the time. And so, yeah, a little bit of the opportunity to become a principal in Tampa. They have a very long pathway, so to speak, what you need to accomplish from being an assistant principal before you can even consider applying for principal roles. And I was in a position where I didn't, first of all, even want to be an assistant principal at the beginning, to where now I was really looking forward to the next step. So being able to kind of go right into a principal role in my hometown made a lot of sense, and being close to family with a new baby in tow. So yeah, that's where I got my first role as a principal, Title I building, Woodside Elementary in West Ottawa, Michigan.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. Now let's get back to the episode.
Awesome. So you went from Michigan, and then you got yourself out to Denver, Colorado, and I think you're in the Parker area.
I am. My wife, she had an opportunity out here in it's a little south of Parker, is a little south of Denver, Parker, Castle Rock. And so at that time, we had our third kid, and she had an opportunity out here. And so I went and, put my name in the hat for some positions out here in Douglas County, and was lucky enough to land at Mammoth Heights Elementary. And it's been 10 years now. So, and all my kids have come to school with me at Mammoth Heights since kindergarten. And now one's in middle school now, about to go to high school next year. And two are still with me at Mammoth Heights. So yeah, that's a great experience as well, just having to be able to have your kids with you through that whole elementary experience.
Yeah, no, for me, I got to teach one of my kids Algebra 1. I was a first-time principal with my other one.
Okay.
Senior, so her junior and senior year, Dad was the principal of high school,
Right.
12 building. So that was, that was a little challenging, during that time. And then we have a fifth grader right now. And so she started in the, other school, Southern Valley, as a kindergartner and a first grader. So it was really nice because she could just come over to my office and hang out after school. And, times that day, get on the bus and go home.
Yep.
So it's nice to have her around. But then when we moved to, this job at Hastings, she's in a totally separate building. I'm over up to high school. She's at an elementary. So that took some time for her to get used to, because she's used to Dad being around.
Yeah.
And then now it's fine. Now she's going to be a sixth grader going to middle school. And I'm like, oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
It won't be long until she's up at the high school with me. I'm kind of like, but by that time I'll be established in my role, and it will be just fine. I think it was a little harder on my middle child when I was the principal, because she was a junior in high school, junior and senior. I wasn't really established in my role, and there were some challenges you never think of, and it's hard on your kids sometimes when you are that building principal, because people think you're doing things because your kid's telling you things, and that's not 100% true. Like, you have to keep professionalism and
I found too, it's the after school stuff that is probably the most challenging. I did not expect was all these birthday parties that my kids get invited to, that now I have to go, and now I'm the dad and also kind of still the principal, and those were the weird situations, at least at the elementary level, is the after school events when you have to like determine if you're going to go to this event as the dad or the principal, or you know what, I'm just going to send Mrs. Holtvluwer. She can take care of that one. So it does get you out of a few things too.
Yeah, I know. For me, like, it's one of those things where your kids' friends get to see you in a different light, and they do when you're at work, and so that's a little bit different too, because your kids call you a certain name, and next thing you know, their friends are like, "No, I'm at work, so you got to call Mr. Linden
Yep.
today." There's some of those things. It's fine, but it's just one of those weird things you don't think about until you get in the role. And it
It's
doesn't
true.
matter for me. It doesn't matter if I'm going as a dad. It
Yeah.
didn't matter. They wanted to talk shop everywhere you went,
True.
especially when you're in a small district. I'm like, well, dude, I'm here to like
Yeah.
just call your dad. And at the district I'm at, I can do that a little bit better because people like will give you that space a little bit more. But when I was in that smaller district, it was like, they wanted to know about anything and everything, what's going on at school. They also like to, give you their advice on what they would do and
Yeah.
how they would handle things. So
That's true.
it was
Yeah.
almost like I was a head football coach all over again because I had that too.
Okay.
Kinds of advice on how I should coach and what plays I should run. And I was just like, well, if you like coaching, here's an application. So
Good.
what are some things at Mammoth Heights that you're like really proud of? You've been there for 10 years.
Yeah.
And what are some things that you've done there to really help that school grow and become the school they are today?
First of all, I came in we wanted to establish a positive climate and culture. That was a big deal. That was one of my strengths when I first became a principal, and at Woodside in Michigan, where I was the fourth principal in 4 years, and so I realized pretty quick you gotta really do what you can to create a positive climate and culture, and you can never let your foot off the gas on that, no matter what other initiatives you may have that are either a district-led initiative or a school-led initiative. Climate and culture, making sure your teachers feel supported, making sure the community we're building trust in our community of parents and teachers. So that was a big part of what I had to do at Mammoth Heights as well, is just to establish trust with my community and teachers, let them know I'm there to support them and give them the resources they need to be successful. And so that was a big first step. And I learned never, ever take your foot off the gas on that. And then I would tell you, I'm really proud of how we've done a job of hiring teachers. I think that's a really important job as a building leader, is who you hire and the people you have around you. And so, I remember when we had a principal who was in our district who retired after 17 years of being a principal at the same building. I thought to myself, wow, 17 years at one building. I bet you that guy hired every person in that building. And I thought to myself, okay, I've been here, and this was a few years ago, I've been here like 6 years. And I kind of went through the roster in my head and realized I've almost hired every teacher in this building in 6 years. So it can go quickly on who you have to bring in and how they can then influence that climate and culture that you want to continue to create within your building. So really proud of the hiring that we've done. Really proud of all of our teachers. That's why I send my kids to my same school. I wouldn't want to send them anywhere else, because I know the quality of educators that are in our building. And we do that through, a committee on who we hire. So diligence in hiring the right people that fit your climate and culture and the vision that you have for your school. So establishing a positive climate and culture, and then hiring those people to do that. And then lately it's been the PLC process. So kind of going back to what we talked about in not having to do this job alone. And that PLC process helps to foster collaborative conversations, problem solving that can happen within that PLC, and then being able to utilize the skills that each teacher can bring to the table and how that can help every child, not just the kids in your class, but every child in the building. So all that stuff.
That's great stuff, man. I know one of the things we think about when we're hiring, we think about, would we want this teacher teaching our children?
Yeah.
Would I be comfortable putting my own child in that teacher's classroom? And if
Yep.
my answer is no, we're not hiring.
Yep.
If the answer is yes, then it's more likely, yeah, you're probably going to come on. And
So,
I know for us, I'm going to ask you this because I know, like, when we're hiring, we want to hire great teachers, and
mhm.
we kind of have a process. We have questions, we have scenarios, we have things we purposely do in the interviews to see the responses, and
Uh-huh.
we really look at those responses really critically because we know how they respond to these specific
Yeah.
scenarios or questions will tell us a lot about their philosophy and how they are as a teacher. And so, do you do some of the same things? Because
Yeah.
I call it like we mess with them. Like we mess with some people and we ask them questions, and sometimes they're just like flabbergasted. I've never,
Yeah.
been asked some of these questions, or I've never had to even think about this type of question when I was, they don't think about some of this stuff. Do you do
Yeah.
some of that stuff too?
Yeah. Obviously, we have a lot of questions that our committee kind of combs through. I have 2 questions on the interview list that I ask every time. And so one's kind of a simple one. I think a lot of people ask this question, but I put so much stock into it because it means something. That the question is, basically, what do you know about Mammoth Heights and why do you want to join our Mammoth Heights community? And if they've done zero research, it's so obvious. I think I want people that have they're begging to be in this place because they've done their research. They know what we're all about. I'm going to tell you, Jeff, I'm not hard to find, right? So I think I'm not hard to find. Deion Sanders says that I'm not hard to find. You can find what we're doing on social media, on our website, on YouTube. There's so much things that we're doing. If you don't know what we're about, you did like zero research. If you just plug Mammoth Heights Elementary into a Google search, you're going to find out all about us. So that's the first question. Like if they say, well, and you can always tell they're struggling through it. So that's the first question. If they don't pass, I lose a little bit of interest. And the second question I ask all the time, and I'm a big John Gordon fan. I don't know if you heard of John Gordon with the Energy Bus. I'm a big John Gordon fan, and I listen to his podcast. And a lot of the times he'll ask this question. It's called his Triple H question. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. And since most people call me Mr. H at my school, I like this question because it's the Triple H question. I ask the teachers, the potential candidates, who's a hero of yours? What's a personal or professional highlight? And what would be a hardship you faced? So hero, hardship, highlight. And so I learned so much from that question because their personalities come out. And most times a really good candidate will talk about their hero, how their hero got them through a hardship, and then how that hardship turned into a highlight. So when I see how all those 3 things are connected on their answer, I know I have a pretty good candidate. And no matter what they said on their instructional practices, I'm sure it was all good. They know all the buzzwords, but I'm always curious about who their hero is, the hardships they faced, and their personal professional highlight. And I've heard it all, Jeff. I've heard it all. Somebody said that their hero was themselves once. And so I was like, okay, I'm not sure how to accept that as an answer, but let's go with it. But hero, hardship, highlight gives me a lot of feedback that you don't necessarily get on some of those more standardized interview questions.
No, I love it. I mean, I'm a big John Gordon fan too. The very first book I read as an educator was The Energy Bus.
Yep.
I still have The Energy Bus. I've read it a few times. Actually, I have it on Audible as where I'll listen to it at times. But it's one of the books I've read more than once. I actually have things in my office that talk about the 10 rules,
Yep.
to the right of your life. So, I mean, it's posted.
Right.
If you come in my office, you'll see
Yeah.
posted. I got a lot out of that. And I was just, at that time I was teaching, I was coaching, but it's just so true even now today. It still resonates just with education in general.
Absolutely.
So I really love those. We don't exactly do the 3 H's exactly like you do. We have very similar type questions that we'll ask, but we get to know what are something you're proud of? What are some things
Yeah.
what's something that you're proud of, a highlight, right? What is something that's challenged you? How did you learn and grow from that? Because we want to know if you're reflective, if you can
Yes.
think through things and understand that, hey, I'm going to learn through these things and I'm going to become better because of that. Because that shows us what? A growth mindset.
Yeah,
And
and
that's
that
what we want.
a reflective teacher is so powerful.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, it's so powerful.
Did you hire the one that said they're heroes themselves?
No.
I can agree with that. All right, Nick. I want to kind of get into social media a little bit
Sure.
because one of the first things that I follow you on Facebook and you post a lot. You do like, public service announcements, PSAs. You do. I mean, you do all kinds of things. I don't want to get into the comedy part yet, but like, what got you into doing like the videos and
Yep.
TikToks and the things that you post out there? What was it that said, I'm going to start doing this? And then
Yeah,
what kind of impact have you been seeing as you've done those things? And
I
you
know.
do it not just for yourself, but you do it for your school too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I can remember exactly when I started with social media. And I think it clicked with me because I had that communications background, right? That time in my life that I thought I wasted working in television and communications has now come back when I heard a speech by George Koros. He's a keynote speaker. I don't know if you read the book, The Innovator's Mindset, but he gave a speech at a keynote at a conference I was at, and he talked about what we need to do to put more positive out into the world of education to drown out all the negative. And so that really resonated with me when I heard that. And so I wanted to be able to put as much positive out there to be reflective of what's happening in our schools than all the negative. And so started with Twitter and started a handle for our school and just started posting every day. It was a goal. You had to set a goal for yourself to be able to put out content. And it takes work to be able to do that. So putting out content through Twitter was a big part of it. And then that kind of morphed into I read a conversation. It was like a blog post by George Koros about, hey, this new thing called TikTok's coming out and educators are taking advantage of it. And this was like 2019, 2020. So I said, yeah, I'm going to get involved in the TikTok as well. And it kind of hit at almost the same time the pandemic hit. So I used social media in that moment to create that connection that we were lacking because of online learning and other things that were happening in the world, to connect what was happening in education, good things were still happening, even though we may be in our homes and our teachers are in their homes, but we're still connecting. And I always had this YouTube channel that I did a morning show on. And I've been doing a morning show for probably 13 years on YouTube, even at my old school. And so even things like that, we're able to continue and keep consistency through the difficult time of COVID. So kids could every morning know I can at least watch the morning show before I log on with my teacher face to face. They're going to see Mr. H in this difficult time and have maybe be a stabilizing force. So yeah, a lot of those things kind of help morph what we wanted to do to always make connections with our community and put more positive than negative.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey there, amazing educational leaders. If you're finding value in this podcast, learning new insights, getting inspired, or just nodding along thinking, yep, I needed that, then why keep it to yourself? Share this podcast with a colleague, a fellow school leader, or a teacher that is inspiring into leadership. Send them a link, post about it, or just casually drop, hey, you need this in your life the next time you see them. Let's grow this community of game-changing educators together, because great leadership isn't a solo act, it's a movement. Now, back to the show. You bet. And I totally subscribe to that wholeheartedly. What got me going in is talking about branding your school. I actually saw Joe Sanfilippo at a convention, and he talked about branding your school and the social media power that you can have. And having people see the positives so you can outweigh the negatives, because a lot of
Right.
people, I mean, we have this thing in Hastings called the Hastings complaint page. You might have something similar out there in your guys' area as well, but I don't get on it. I don't care what's on it. Sometimes they talk about the school. They talk about a lot of crazy stuff. My thing is I don't try to dwell. We try to put out positive messaging in our school. And one of the things that we did when I got here, this school had a low social media platform. We didn't put a lot of content out, so it's really hard to know what's going on with the school. And we have a lot of great things. So now, 4 years later, our teachers, I have a digital content creator that manages all the content that goes out. We do 5 posts a day. We have all these systems in place, and teachers can put posts. I encourage them, hey, show all the great things you're doing. They've done a really nice job of showing all the things that we do. And one of the coolest things I got this year when interviewing, and I kind of asked some questions like, why Hastings? And I'm trying to get them what kind of research have you done? It's kind of what I'm trying to figure out. And I've had people reference some of our posts, and that made me go, see, it's working. I want to be a part of you guys because we see all the great things you're doing, and we want to be a part of that. That's why I'm a huge believer in that. And to be honest with you, when you put out personal content like you and I do sometimes, it's a little scary because you're like, I don't know how people are going to take it, but you get used to it. That first time I posted, I was scared to death. I was I don't want people bagging on me, or
Right. That's
whatever.
true.
And they will. I'm just like, well, that's part of being a principal.
Yeah. That's right.
So with that, what got you into comedy? I see you go out, you do some comedy shows, and what kind of sets do you do?
Yeah.
There, do you talk about education? Talk about anything, everything?
Oh yeah.
Some of it. So yeah, take us through that whole process. What got you going to Comedy Works and
I know. So, comedy, jokes and comedy were always a part of my life. I remember I wrote my first joke book in 5th grade, and I made copies of it, and I sold them to all my buddies for 25 cents a piece. Jokes were always in my life. I was doing dad jokes, I think, before there were dad jokes. And so knowing that, I just always loved comedy, listened to comedy. I was a nut about it, even in college. And there was not as many resources as there are now when I was in college. I was in college in the 90s. So no videos or anything. I was just reading and listening to CDs and audio cassettes. And then I said, I'm going to try it. And I did stand up at a college talent show when I was a sophomore in college. And it was the most fun I ever had. I don't know why I stopped. I just did. Maybe I thought, let's just do it as a goal. And then I've never thought about doing it again. And then a few years ago, every year we have a talent show at my school, and I'm the host of the talent show. And of course, whenever I'm in front of a crowd, I'm not going to pass up that opportunity to go into my jokes, right? So I'm hosting, I'm telling jokes. And then there was a lady who came up to me one year after the talent show and said, hey, have you ever thought about doing stand-up comedy? I'm like, I did it a long time ago. Back in college, it was a dream of mine a long time ago. She's like, you should get back into it. And I said, in my head, I'm like, well, what do you know about comedy? Well, her granddaughter was in the show, and she was the grandma of her, and she was a professional comedian at Comedy Works. So she gave me her card. I'm like, oh, maybe she knows something. She does it for a living. And so she's been kind of a mentor to me to push me out of my comfort zone. And that's another reason why I started to do it again, because I'm a big believer in stepping outside your comfort zone and then not only saying it, but modeling it. And I can't think of anything else harder to do and to step outside your comfort zone than to get up on stage and tell jokes and hope people laugh, right? So that dream kind of got reignited again through another person, right, who kind of encouraged me to do it when I never thought I would ever do it again. And so little by little, been going on stage. And Denver has a pretty cool system for people that want to get into stand-up comedy with New Talent Night at Comedy Works. I've been doing that for about 2 years now. Took some classes at Comedy Works, open mics, and was lucky enough to kind of reach out to some other comedians who are former teachers, and they just do a teacher show. I reached out to them and I said, I would love to someday maybe be on your show. And they're like, how about you can be on the next one? We'll give you 5 minutes. I'm like, this is great. This is my audience. It's all teachers. And that's what I kind of just stick to, like what we do as a principal, as an educator. It's all clean and tell stories and puns and one-liners just about everyday life. I'll throw some observational type humor about being married and kids, but usually it's a perspective from a school principal, and it's been, I would say, pretty well received, and it's been so much fun. And it's a skill that you can take back to the school where you're talking in front of people. It's public speaking, but in the end, it was just about like sticking to a big time philosophy of mine is stepping outside your comfort zone, and that's how you grow. And so I thought to myself, I've been a principal now for almost 13, 14 years. There's really not a lot that surprises me or shocks me anymore. Every day is different, but nothing I've seen it a lot. I've seen it all. Why not just like go up on stage and get that heart pumping again of not knowing what to expect. And so, yeah, it's been a fun journey, and yeah, I met some great people along the way, and it's actually kind of refocused what we do as principals, to refocus my energy in a lot of different ways.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
All right, educational leaders. You know how we tell our students feedback makes us better? Well, same goes for this podcast. If you've been getting value from this podcast, please take 60 seconds to leave a quick 5-star review. This review isn't just a pat on the back, although I appreciate it. It helps other leaders find the show, join the conversation, and grow right along with us. More reviews equal more reach equal a stronger community of game-changing educators. So hit that review button, drop a few words, and let's keep making educational leadership better together. Now, back to the show. I appreciate, man, that's a lot of insight there, and I really love how, like, you know what, you're able to take something that, you know, I'm stepping out of my comfort zone, something I haven't done in a while. What a great message you can send your kids and staff.
Yeah.
As, you know, hey, I do things that I'm not comfortable with, and here we go, right? Like, you talk to them about trying a new strategy. I talked about to my staff all the time, don't be afraid of failure.
Right.
Because if you're afraid of failure, you're not going to grow, you're not going to get better, because you're going to be too afraid to fail. And one of my biggest things is I've gotten better at this the last 4 years, is getting in front of my staff and talking and presenting and all that stuff, because I didn't have to do that as much.
Yeah.
On that former one, but now it's kind of like almost like I have to, because of my position. I'm at a bigger school and I have to get good at this, and it's led me to opportunities to present at our state conference, and then again this summer. You know, my presentation is going to be called "Be the Change," and so you know, what can we do as principals to be the change for your schools, for your teachers, and for your community? So there's a little teaser if you're going to come to Nebraska. Awesome. I'll be doing that this summer. That'll be fun. But yeah, like, it's just, you know, the things that you've done has prepped you up to this point, and you have some great content. I've listened to it. I love comedy. I love comedy. I can sit here and listen to comedy, and there's a lot of good people out there that you may not know, and that's probably why I started watching, because you're just funny, and I just you're really good. Like, I just love listening to like where you come up. I know a lot of it's like just your personal experience, but I'm like going, I'm too scared to say some things because I'm worried that people are going to go, they're talking about me. And there's some funny stuff out there.
Oh, yeah.
There's some stories that we could tell that are hilarious. There's people out there that you're like going, you know what, if I could, you know, do this, I mean, you know, sometimes you shake people. because you can't believe you're having to have some conversations. But
I know.
it's another podcast down the road.
Right on. Yeah, that's true.
But when it comes down to it, you've been a principal, a leader for a long time. You got a lot of great things going. What advice would you give somebody that's thinking about taking that next step? Hey, I want to become an educational leader. What advice would you give them?
Yeah. So it didn't, when I first became an assistant principal and I had to learn quickly, I was kind of under the impression that or maybe the delusion that I was going to do everything I could to make everybody happy. And I couldn't tell you how much I hated the job when I tried to make everybody happy. And I thought it could be done. And you sometimes hear, you'll never make everybody happy. You never will. And I was, my head was in the clouds enough to say, I could do it. I can make everybody happy. And I sure as heck tried to make everybody happy. But the more I tried to make everybody happy, my job became less enjoyable as an administrator. And it didn't take me long to realize, all right, this isn't going in the direction I thought it would. I need to reset. I need to reflect my practice. And so I said, you know what? I'm just going to make decisions that I know is best for my school, that's best for kids, that's best for teachers. Some kids aren't going to like it. Some parents aren't going to like it, and some teachers aren't going to like it, but that's okay. And the minute I started to have that mentality of I'm going to do what's best for our school and for our kids and for the teachers, everything kind of fell into place. And I started to enjoy the job, and I started to understand how to deal with conflict when teachers disagreed with a decision, which in my head, I was like, I can't even imagine going to Mrs. Bass, who I talked to about before, and telling her in her office that I disagree with her. I just didn't think that would happen. And then when it started happening to me, I also just had to say, okay, when it comes to being a leader, you're not going to be able to make everybody happy, and that's okay. And then in doing that, never, even though you give so much of yourself to your students and to your community and to your teachers, never expect it to come back to you. And that was another big lesson, is that I always thought, okay, I'm going to do all these things for my community, and I'm going to get so much love back. I'm going to build up so much capital back that I'll be able to do anything. Everyone's going to be so thankful for everything I've done for them. And I've learned that that's not always the case, and don't expect it to come back, because early on in my career, I expected all my goodwill to come back to me. And that was another lesson. So don't worry about making everybody happy. Do what's best for your school, and don't expect everything that you do to support your community to come back to you. You just do it. You just do what you got to do.
Yeah, I think you do those things because you care about your community, you care about your school, and you want what's best for them. And those things come back in time, but it may be years down the road.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
It's not going to be right away. And
that's true. That is true.
Some of my most gratifying moments in education is when I hear from a former student, a former teacher, a former, somebody I've impacted and not realize it. And when they come tell you their story, you're like, oh, the work I do does matter. Because in the time, you don't think it does, or you don't think you have an impact, but you do. And I think that's what makes education special, because you will find out years down the road that you impacted somebody you never thought you would have impacted. And I think those are the things you take and you run with it. Like, those are the moments that you're like, this is why I do what I do. And I really like the fact that you can't make everybody happy, because guess what? I always joke, like, half of you love me, half of you hate me. Get over it. Like, I know that. Like, I'm not going to sit here and sweat the small stuff. Yep. I'm going to have a teacher not mad at or not happy with me about a decision that they didn't like. Well, guess what? This is the decision. This is what we're going to do. And I don't come up with these decisions by myself. I use a collective group of people to help me make decisions. It's not just me sitting up there on my little throne telling people what to do. I'm not a dictator. I actually bring people in We make decisions as a team, and we
Yep.
say, you know what, this is what the team decided, and we move forward, and we go that direction. And not everybody's going to be happy. And if you think you're going to do that, you are going to bang your head against the
Yes.
wall.
Yes.
You know, you don't want to be doing that too much because then
You're right.
that burns you out, and you don't want to do the job. So
You're absolutely right. You're never in it alone as a teacher, and you're never in it alone as a principal, and you still have the ability to lean in on the expertise of all the stakeholders around you.
you bet. So, Nick, you have a lot of great things going on, and if people are listening to this podcast, how could they connect with you, learn more about you? Where can they go to find?
Appreciate it, Jeff. So yeah, I'm on TikTok at Nick Holtvluwer, Instagram Nick Holtvluwer, and then on YouTube, Nick Holtvluwer. Yeah, I'd love for anybody to follow along. And yeah, we like to have fun at our school. We like to tell some jokes. We like to have, it's not an easy job. It's sometimes a thankless job, but what we like to do is put out more positive than the negative that's out there in the world, and have fun along the way for our teachers and for our students.
You bet. What I'll do is I'll put all that information down in the show notes so they can come and find you right away and
Cool.
get connected. And so, Nick, before we go, do you have like your favorite joke that you would like to tell us? Like,
Ooh.
you don't have to do, like, do you have like, hey, this is kind of like, one of my favorite staple jokes. Like, I have dad jokes and people hate them, but I like to joke around. But I mean, I'm not,
Yeah. I remember the very first joke I ever heard. I must have been like 3. My dad told it to me. I don't know if I really understood it right away, but throughout the years, I now understand it. But the joke is, how do you catch a unique rabbit? Unique up on it. And then my dad would say, how do you catch a tame rabbit? Tame way. There you go. My very first joke I ever heard.
There you go. Like some of the jokes I would do as a math teacher is like, what did a baby acorn say when it grew up?
What's that?
Gee, I'm a tree.
So my favorite joke, here's my favorite joke I do on stage that I wrote. All right. I would say that teacher evaluation is one of the least favorite parts of my job. I had to ask my music teacher why all the singing kids were asking so many questions. And he said, they inquire. So there you go.
That's a good one. Yeah, no, it's great stuff, man. Nick, I really appreciate you being on the show tonight. Do you have any final thing you'd like to say before we go?
Oh, first of all, I just want to say thank you, Jeff, for having me. And it's always inspiring to talk with other educators across the country and to share ideas and share thoughts. So I'm honored that you asked to have me on the show. And yeah, thank you so much. Good luck as our teachers and schools finish up this school year. And if you're in Denver, I'll be with the Unteachables at Comedy Works South on June 3rd.
You bet. Check it out, guys. If there's one thing I took from this conversation, it's this. Leadership doesn't have to be rigid to be effective. It can be real, it can be human, and yes, it can even be funny. Nick Holtvluwer is a great example of what it looks like to lead with heart, connect with people where they are, and bring a little joy into a profession that needs it. If you found value in today's episode, make sure to subscribe and share it with another educator and continue the conversation. And as always, in order to be the change, be curious and 1% better. Oh yeah, may the 4th be with you. Thank you for sticking around to the very end of this episode. I hope this podcast brings value to you as an educational leader. I would invite you to share this podcast with other educational leaders, or maybe that inspiring teacher who would like to be an educational leader someday. I would also invite you to subscribe and to follow this podcast so you can get the most recent updated episodes when they drop. I would also love it if you leave a review and rate this podcast 5 stars, because that would make this podcast more discoverable to other educators like yourself. You can also follow me on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, X, Threads, and Substack. All you need to do is look for Principal JO, and boom, there I am. This is where we can continue the conversations from the episodes that you have enjoyed. I am so thankful for you guys for listening. Until next time, always be 1% better.